be a vestige of olden
Exactly.
times,
Yeah.
but other than that, you really couldn't tell. We went from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. We went early, spent a couple days there, and then traveled from there through different parts of Germany to Austria, and finally to Budapest, Hungary, and saw many, many of the great creations of man, which ultimately are a reflection of God's creative activity, and many of them dedicated to God, as we were in a lot of cathedrals. Although I couldn't help but wonder how much money had been taken from people who could ill afford it under the guise of gaining salvation to build these opulent manifestations that were, I don't know, maybe sometimes the glory of man. I don't know, but many wonders to behold, and it's certainly seeing God's creation too, in the mountains and the valleys, the rivers, so many things that we saw.
I want to tell one story.
Yep.
On the airplane coming back, which I thought was one of the coolest things happening, I was sitting by a young man, and he had he was African American, looked pretty young to me. He had a sweatshirt, had a Bible verse on it, and Bill was here, and this guy was here. So I was talking to him a little bit, and I said, "I like your shirt," and found out he had been raised in a refugee camp in where, Bill? Starts the name. Rwanda, which we've heard about over the years as being horrible. And that's where he grew up. And he said he tried, there was no school for the kids there, so he ended up trying to teach kids. But I thought that is so cool, sitting next to this guy. You know, we've been with rich people for 2 weeks now. I'm a real genuine person who's had a really bad past and risen above it. I was really impressed by him. His wife was sitting somewhere else. I couldn't get seats together. So I didn't talk to her. I saw her later, but he lives in Arizona now. And he watched movies a lot with the headphones. I talked to him only a short time, but I thought, what a great testimony. This young man says, we're raising our kids to love Jesus. He said, that's the most important thing. So I don't even know his name or anything, but it was very moving to sit by him. Because of all the horror stories you've heard of Rwanda, here's somebody who survived it and is serving the Lord.
Yes. On the other hand, on the ship, we met one couple that were probably Christians. At least they talked about having their kids in a Christian school, so I'm assuming that they were. Other than that, we tried to put it out there that we taught in a Christian school and all this stuff, and nobody commented much at all.
Except for the comment, well, I don't agree with anything but public schools. Okay.
Yeah. And they would ask me what I taught, and I taught Bible, and
No.
I thought that would get some nibbles, but not at all. Then the last day or so, I had taken some business cards with me that I just made up that have my discovering his story on it, and also there are YouTube set at this church's site, and I said I invite you to watch my TV show, and among the there was a table of Aussies and New Zealanders, and one of the guys there seemed interested. Everybody said, "Oh yeah, I'll watch it," and but so we'll see. Maybe the Lord will use that, even though we didn't have really opportunities arise to talk about Christ. But maybe they'll find an interest there. And if you're interested in seeing our trip, slides of it, talk to Beth Rye. If there's enough interest, maybe we'll put something together and take you on our trip.
I will say, everybody thinks we're world travelers. We are preschoolers. We found out these people travel all the time. Oh, this is my 9th Viking cruise. Oh, you should go to Madagascar. It's wonderful there. I've been to Iceland 3 times. wow, we're in preschool. We thought we traveled more than most people. It's a whole different part of the population out there I didn't know existed. Is that right, Vaughn?
It's crazy what people spend on.
And they have the money to do it, which surprised us.
There's a rise in people taking out loans to go on travel.
They didn't seem like it.
Like,
Some people,
Yeah.
probably not.
these people have money. One table where we're sitting at dinner, say, so she's a cancer research person and her husband's a medieval music college professor. Okay. All right. I taught first grade.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of more practical things, maybe. Luke chapter 10, we were kind of in the middle of things when we decided to leave for a few weeks. So let's go back to verse 30 and we'll pick up where we stopped before, I think. So this is in the context of a lawyer, a scribe, asking Jesus what he should do to inherit eternal life, verse 25. And Jesus asks him to tell him what the law says, and he answers with the Shema Israel. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbors yourself. And Jesus said, that's right, do that. And then the guy wants to justify himself by saying, who is my neighbor? I want to limit that so I can fit in my lifestyle and come out on okay. So verse 30, Jesus doesn't give him an answer except in the form of a story. So Jesus replied and said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Now, this is where we stopped explaining the story. And now we come to the question that Jesus asks, who proved to be a neighbor? He says, which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? So Jesus reversed the question asked by the lawyer from who is my neighbor to who proved to be a neighbor. Jesus showed the lawyer that he was asking the wrong question. The question is not who is my neighbor, but to whom am I a neighbor? And Jesus forces the lawyer to answer the question verbally in front of all these witnesses. Jesus actually got him to state that a Samaritan was a neighbor to a Jew. Now, what would you have said in reply to this inquirer? Who is my neighbor? I venture that any of us might have pontificated at length upon what the Old Testament scriptures have to say relating to servanthood and showing mercy. Yet in 2 minutes, says one pastor, Jesus left that man admitting in words and totally unable to get away from the fact that all his previous conceptions had been completely wrong. If that is not answering the question, I do not know what is. Verse 37, and he said, the one who showed mercy toward him. Do you remember as a child, or maybe one of your own children, when confronted with giving an answer to something that was previously contended against? You know, in other words, when they were shown they were wrong, the answer comes reluctantly. I remember one time my brother, who's 10 years younger than I am, has always been particularly obstinate. And when he was about 10 years old, he used a word incorrectly. And so I corrected him. I said, no, the word doesn't mean that. It means this. And he insisted that I was wrong. So I got the dictionary, opened it up, went to the word. I said, here, there it is. And you know what his response was? The dictionary's wrong. Well, at least this guy didn't do that. At least he admitted who was the neighbor, but notice he didn't actually say what the guy was. He just said the one who showed mercy. He wouldn't even name the Samaritan. The answer came reluctantly because the whole of his past rebelled against the answer that he knew he was expected to give. And even then, he could not bring himself to say the Samaritan. A.T. Robertson, that great Greek scholar, thinks that the lawyer saw the point and gave the correct answer, but he gulped at the word Samaritan and refused to say that. Well, this scribe apparently did not understand that the nuance of the requirement of the law entailed the fact that the love of God and the love of neighbors are interrelated. You see, sometimes we want to separate those things. You know, we want to separate love of God from love of neighbor. But it just occurred to me, what's it say in 1 John? The one who hates his brother can't say he loves God. They're interrelated. And so Jesus is expanding this scribe's perception of not only what it means to love his neighbor, but what it means to love God. So how does Jesus respond to this admission that it was this guy who was the one who proved himself to be a neighbor? Then Jesus said to him, go and do the same. There's an emphatic you in the way it's arranged in Greek. Literally, it's go also you doing the same. Once again, the Greek scholar A.T. Robertson says, this parable of the Good Samaritan has built the world's hospitals, and if understood and practiced, will remove race prejudice, national hatred, and war class jealousy. And that's the truth. Without government intervention, it ought to happen out of the souls and hearts of God's people. And sad to say, a lot of our national history is filled with, I think, particularly race prejudice that was sometimes engendered by people who claim to be Christians. I don't know, some of you are old enough to remember growing up and maybe even hearing Christians using racial slurs and all those kind of things. And certainly, it wasn't the evangelical church that stood up against racism in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't the evangelical church that went down south and stood up for the rights of African Americans to vote and all those things. And I'm not saying necessarily that we should have done that, but certainly should have been at least verbally on the side of sometimes our fellow believers who were simply wanting the same rights that the rest of us had. But we can be happy looking at the fact that when you go around the world and look at hospitals, for example, and other places that are designed to meet the needs of people, that largely they're built by Christians. There are Christian ministries that did that. And even in this area, and in a broad sense, we can use the Roman Catholic Church to include in that as well, because even though the Roman Catholic Church is in error about a lot of things, it was the idea of the Good Samaritan that is the foundation, at least in many ways, of even our Roman Catholic hospitals in this area and other places. All right, any comment on that before we go on to one more point? I want to,
Just
yeah,
to say,
yeah.
just to reiterate, it's so critically important. I mean, we just, having grown up in a, with my stepmom being African American and having family and, my dad's side of the family totally rejected my dad
Yeah.
when he married my stepmom. I delivered a newspaper to my uncle, my dad's brother. I never knew him, didn't know, because he wouldn't have anything to do with my dad
Mhm.
because of that. It's just,
It's sad and it's, I don't know. Sometimes makes me angry to think how Christians
Yeah.
have behaved. Let's consider what J.C. Ryle, that great expositor, had to say. Let us not forget, in leaving this passage, to apply the high standard of duty which it contains to our own hearts and to prove our own selves. Do we love God with all our heart and soul and strength and mind? I mean, it warrants a pause right there for us to examine ourselves. And then, do we love our neighbor as ourselves? Where is the person that could say with perfect truth, I do? Where is the man that ought not to lay his hand on his mouth when he hears these questions? Verily, we are all guilty in this matter. The best of us, however holy we may be, come far short of perfection. Passages like this should teach us our need of Christ's blood and righteousness. To him we must go if we would ever stand with boldness at the bar of God. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar, an English expression, the bar refers to the bar that's in not where you drink, but in a courtroom. Because in English courts you don't sit on a witness stand, you stand at the bar if you're the accused, and you stand behind this. What's the other word for I can't a railing.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the bars and.
Yeah,
approach the bar.
yeah.
Approach the bench.
The bench is what they, yeah. Okay, let's see. From him, we must seek grace, that the love of God and man may become ruling principles of our lives. The love of God and man may become ruling principles of our lives. In him we must abide, that we may not forget our principles, and that we may show the world that by them we desire to live. Does anyone come to mind as someone to whom you find it difficult to be a neighbor?
In this room.
In this room or without it?
Yeah, I think of this one lady. Ever since, see, her son got shot to death couple of years ago. And ever since then, she's been going off the rocker, drinking and taking drugs, I guess, she's taking drugs. And she's starting to kind of start fighting people and stuff, and she's very hard to get along with.
Mhm.
And I guess my testimony is not hitting her. Gets in my face and wants to start something.
Sometimes it's your actual neighbor.
Yeah, we have a neighbor that the relationship is really hard to describe. Sometimes she has been very friendly and helpful, even, mowing the backyard when she thought I wasn't going to do it. And mowing leaves in our backyard to other times when she won't even speak to us and she's yelled at me. And so we've talked about recently. I've stopped, I saw her outside and stopped over to see how she was because I'd seen EMT at her house. I think it was the day before, and she wouldn't even answer me. Just grunted. Said, how are you? Fine. Just that. And I'm just trying to be neighborly and show concern for. And so that's our example of someone to whom it's hard to be a neighbor. I could give you lots of examples, but yeah, Wanda.
I have someone who's rather difficult for me. And I posted something this week and I made sure this person didn't see. But I was like, why are people like this, that treat you like garbage no matter how kind you are? And Bonnie responded, we prayed. And it hit me right between the eyes. I'm like, that's what I need to do. It's so hard. I mean, relationships are hard everywhere, but, you know, it was convicting because here I'm thinking about myself and how it affects me. And this person does claim to be a Christian, which is hard to understand. But that's what we need to do. It's love them. It's like we want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not just our neighbors, it's also our neighbors, it's the people we work with.
Mhm.
I had a coworker who's an African American guy from Youngstown, and he would let skip off work. And I had to pick up the slack and everything, so my wife and I prayed for him, and the Lord handles things in mysterious ways that we don't know about. He got shot and dies.
Oh,
From a-
don't pray for me. Take me off your list.
I think on that note, there's some things we do need to clarify on this.
Yes.
Loving somebody does not mean you totally immerse yourself in their lives. You
Mhm.
know, being in Pennsylvania Dutch country, we have the old adage, good fences make a good neighbor. And you have to have lines of engagement. Okay, growing up, I think one of the things that really stuck in my mind is Mrs. Knopf, who was our next door neighbor, had a problem with the neighbor on the other side of her. And we constantly wanted to fight for her. So she went out one day and the woman started on her and she had a broom. So she took a broom, stuck it in the ground, put a bonnet on it, and said, argue with this, you'll always win, and walked into her house. There's times you need to disengage. Sometimes the best love you can show somebody is just not engaging.
Mhm.
Because you're not gonna change them, you're not gonna do it, but praying for it. Well, not that they get shot and die. You go the opposite direction. God will deal with their hearts as they might get to know him, because this is not self-sustained. You know, it's sustained, this is God given. And that's what we always got to remember. I think we go out thinking we're going to help this person, we're gonna love this person.
Mhm.
Not that thought.
Also, I wanted to say, sometimes, our neighbors could just be anybody in our life. And one of my friends is meeting with a strange family member today. And she's been reading this book called Peacemakers, and I've been reading it too, and it's talking about conflict, and sometimes conflict with someone, if you really want to have a relationship with that person still, isn't going to that person and trying to make them admit everything they did wrong to you. Sometimes it's taking the wrong into yourself and taking the wrong and saying, God, I know this has happened, this has hurt me, but I'm gonna give it to you, God, and I'm not gonna just try to, your relationship with that person isn't based on how they treat you. Like, you're still, if you want to have, if you need to have one, especially with some part of your family or something like that. And so I'm praying for her today, but I just, it's hard. You sometimes have to take that hurt into yourself and just forgive that person. You have to forgive them,
Mhm.
and not try to figure it all out, not try to get some sort of confession, try to get some sort of and it's a hard thing.
Yeah. The hardest thing is forgiving someone who isn't sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because that's,
And Jesus gives the example, doesn't he, on the cross? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They weren't repentant. They weren't sorry.
And I think sometimes the party might be sorry, but not willing, not able, like maybe burying the things that they did and not able to bring it back. They have to.
Sorry.
Better now than you're right.
Yeah, we can handle the distraction in here.
But the first Peter passage that comes to mind, right? Love covers a multitude of sins.
Yes.
Mhm.
So we're often digging, right? Instead of covering, we want some kind of response. We want some kind of something in return for the love.
Mhm.
Was it in counseling when I was in college? That was the key verse that helped me to deal with some of the stuff in the past. Was, well, I don't need to go back and be digging up all this stuff and getting my parents or other people to say things or do things.
Mhm.
Through Christ, I can become whole and then love them and just cover over it.
Yeah.
Through Christ's love and.
Yeah.
Love covers a multitude of sins.
We have to do that to each other, because no matter how good we think we are, none of us are. And we're all messing up and hurting people all around us all the time, honestly. So people need to do that for us, just like the Lord's Prayer. We need to ask for forgiveness and God will forgive us, because we're all, we shouldn't think of ourselves as better. We all, none of us are, So
Yeah, we're all
need to
flawed.
seek forgiveness and see that.
Good. Well, I thought it might be a good idea for us to spend some time in prayer for one another. Well, first of all, I guess for those neighbors that we find difficult, and for one another as we seek to be a neighbor. So let's break into groups of 2 or 3. And I think it might be advisable if husbands and wives separated, because you probably already know a lot about the neighborliness and all that. But I'll leave that up to you. And just, if you've already shared something, then we can go on that. If you haven't shared your difficult neighbor, then you can share that and pray for one another. We'll do that until the end. So get up, move around, get with somebody, maybe somebody you don't even know. It's a great opportunity to get to know one another and pray together.
You end up spend an extra.
Drinking
Verses and words. In order for him. So then he said. But you get to a point. Was like.
Pretty good scary buddies. They've got a guy walking up the street. Yesterday. The dog blew, or seen the dog, but I didn't see the guy yet. So a couple minutes later, he started walking. Turned the back around because he seen the dog. So I go, and then he called his dog. Nobody ever showed up. And I ended up walking up, talking to the guy. I said, yeah, I had your back. He's the dog out there. He's the base. He didn't even have ace on him. He's got to have something.
Yeah, exactly. Confront them.
Well, I mean, it's just talking.
Exactly.
So that, I go back.
So I guess.
Churches.
Outside.
That's all of that. It is harder than. I'm the authors, I'm the Bible believing weirdo. So it is nice to love them and try to break the stereotype, you know, so that they're judging me because they think I'm judging me. When I'm not judging them, I'm because they're. That's God, it's my job. Judge who they are. It's my job to be.
Just like the chair. Church coffee bowl.
That's what we got. No, that's the. Yeah.
That is what it is in a positive way. There is a time to confront. There is. I think it's not so much person to person. Person to person. It gives you that idea. Yeah. Probably not.
So we're not exactly using. Really? I go.
Yeah, it's pretty much covered all, and maybe, everybody gets more respect for each other.
But there's no.
Better.
I could want to call
Think
you.
about
and say-
other people's feelings are.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's how like where you actually.
There is one place.
Everybody, look out for each other more in life. Think about other people like feel. What your reactions are, like, they. In pain, but.
And where do you work
Not asking for help. She's drowning her.
That's where my nephew is.
all.
There's a lot of people that.
He's getting ready to retire.
Afraid that you can attack her overwhelming.
I mean, you said that earlier to you.
No, I already waited.
So,
I'm over my ear.
Yeah. But you said you were doing. Change.
It's just a matter of.
That's what she needs to do, get past the joint.
Yeah.
She's the root of the problem. She knows what the root of the problem is. Son's not around. Yeah. Sometimes you can't help somebody. Better stay away from her too. Say, have a nice day, keep walking.
Oh, yeah. Just like with the black garments.
What was she saying? Then she come up to you to start.
Boom, down to my feet.
Here's something, a little advice, if that's the way her actions gonna be, say hi, don't say nothing. Just try to stay out of her life.
I didn't say.
Maybe she's at the point, maybe you can't, it's better not to say it. But if you said something first.
Yeah, that's not.
A little bit.
Oh, God.
Will you come by? That was brand new.
Yes. Yeah, everything will work out.
I'll wait 2.5, 3 months, then all of a sudden it's cancel it, and I go, wait, no, it's- I'm sure I'm- Yeah. How long did you have to wait for your first appointment? Always make you wait 2 to 3 months. I need to call now, because September is when my thing. You got one in a couple of weeks, maybe to just, your new patient. Maybe. Anytime I call, it's 2 to 3 months late. I better do that every year until I'm 35. They skip it occasionally, every now and then, skip it easier. And then so many years into it. And I started getting food put in when I was 35. So bladder cancer.
Sometimes going. You, my friend.
Yeah, that's why they give me, I have to go get a check every year. Yeah. Good to see. They cut it out, they put me to sleep and they cut it out. They go in there with scissors. They put a tube up here. And, got a camera on it, cut it.
Then, really feel through places.
Then when I woke up, I had to go to the sleep right left. And it was like lightning.
That was.
Standard procedure, kind of.
I think we're done. So.
Yeah.
You know, was everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.